Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6 Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video, this is the first in a new series of videos that I'm going to be doing. I have a bunch of series in play, but I like to group my topics together into series so that they fit comfortably into a playlist. So series is just another way of saying the word playlist. But this is the first in a new group of videos covering a topic that I've wanted to cover for quite some time, and that is the topic of communications security, or COMSEC. Now, one might ask, if you're a recreational radio user, why do I need to know about COMSEC? You actually don't. This is intended for the other part of my audience, which is actually a bit larger than, well, quite a bit larger actually than my recreational radio audience on this channel, and that is the folks that, well, I have to use a euphemistic term here, and there's reasons for that, folks that like to do adult hide and seek with guns. And we're loosely talking about people that are in mutual aid groups, enhanced neighborhood watches, live on ranches and rural locations where they, have defensive needs that involve other people and might involve communications, that kind of stuff. So, and it's a serious topic, and I think the topic should be dealt with responsibly and in an adult manner. And what I don't like, and this goes largely towards the reason I started this channel in the first place, it's all of the things that I was dissatisfied with in how other people were handling them. I figured I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and try to give a more reasonable, balanced approach to things. Because a lot of people on YouTube, they do things because, well, they want to have a nice, easy life and, make money off of YouTube and kind of do their own thing. And I get that, but to do that, you got to have clicks, you got to have views, you got to have high sub counts. There's a lot of things that you need in order to make money off of YouTube. To get those clicks going, sometimes you have to throw a lot of hyperbole out there and a lot of clickbait nonsense to get people to click on your videos and engage with your material and drive those numbers up in the algorithm. I get that too. But when it comes to a topic where, there are consequences, and if you do things wrong, you can get yourself hurt, or if you take the wrong approach, you can get yourself in trouble. I think it's important that people presenting this information have a certain level of responsibility in presenting it. And when it comes to the subject of communication security, this is one that really fires me up a lot, because I have seen some absolute horse shit put out by people. And, it usually comes from the kind of crowd where a dude's dressed up in battle rattle and he's got a balaclava on and a rifle, and he's standing in the woods with a Baofeng UV5R and doing some crazy nonsense. If you know, you know. And these are the kind of knuckleheads that you probably are going to want to avoid, both in terms of content, but also in terms of physical proximity. These are people that will get you hurt, because they're living in fantasy land. And when it comes to like communication security, I have lost count of the number of times. Well, it's not that much. It's probably 20, 30 videos that I've seen where people have unironically said things like, well, if you key up with this radio, it'll get you killed. How? Seriously, how? Aside from the movie fantasies that you have, from what you've viewed, what are you really talking about here? Because there are people that approach this topic with the mindset that it's a Jason Bourne movie, and that you have the full assets of the National Security Agency, the CIA, the Air Force, Space Force, and everybody's looking for you and trying to direction find you so that they can drop a Hellfire missile up your ass. Well, how important do you really think you are? In order to have assets chasing you like that, you have to have done something particularly nasty. And if that's the case, then probably you deserve to catch a Hellfire missile up the ass. But in terms of being realistic about things, some of the stuff that people put out there really is nonsense. The capabilities that they think the government has, the capability, and then the estimation of what particular OPFOR you're going to be going up against. That's the other thing too. Who are you doing this against? Now, in most cases, the kind of folks that are employing communications for their own personal security package, and here we're talking a radio and a plate carrier, essentially your opposition force in that case is going to be whoever you're defending against. Now, if it's a situation like you're at a protest and you're doing kind of counter protest activities, or you're surveilling things for the benefit of your community to make sure people don't get out of hand and stuff spills out into neighborhoods and stuff. And I've seen that happen. Hell, I had that happen here in my town, and we weren't really particularly beleaguered by the stuff that was happening during the George Floyd protests and all of that, but we did have some stuff go down. We had some rumors in town about we had some kids downtown, and honestly, there were about 100 of them that had gathered downtown with the intent of breaking windows and creating shenanigans. But the problem is, it was just them, and they were just in that one particular area, and they were quickly outnumbered by the police. I mean, like immediately. So they dispersed, and nothing actually happened. Then they dropped a rumor that in my part of town, a lot of the law enforcement folks and firefighters and public safety folks tend to live in one particular part of town for the most part. I mean, they live all over the place, but there's a pretty large concentration of them in a particular region of town, an area I happen to live in, by the way. And there was a rumor that went out on Facebook that the rioters were going to go to the neighborhoods and start messing with, the families of law enforcement. And holy cow, a lot of interested people showed up, including myself, and we had radios. So in that case, my opposition force, if any, would be people that would be similarly equipped with the same type of radios I have. I'm not going up against people that have direction finding capabilities and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that isn't a valid concern, but you have to kind of temper your approach with a realistic expectation of who's even going to be going up against you. If you think about it, and if you've ever talked to anybody that did signals intelligence in Afghanistan, for instance, there was a lot of people, and there's a reason I have an ICOM radio here. It wasn't this one in particular, but there were a lot of ICOM radios, HTs, that were used by Taliban and other forces in Afghanistan, and they were unencrypted. They were transmitting in the open, and it was kind of a known thing that you could monitor those particular frequencies, and you could tell when those guys were operating in your area and sort of get a rough idea of how close they were by the strength of their signal. But that was about the limit to which anybody did any kind of countermeasures. I'm sure at some point some enterprising signals intelligence unit tried to set up direction finding equipment, but it's a bit impractical given the settings, the mountainous terrain and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, you can work that against you. But again, there are these people that think that with the right signal or the right direction finding equipment, that the second you key up, boom, they're going to be on you right away. Now, what a lot of folks point to is activities within the amateur radio community where radio operators have triangulated people that are interfering on the bands, and that gets done, but mainly it gets done because the people that are interfering are doing so continuously, and it's pretty easy to track their signal. But what do you do against somebody who only comes up on the frequency and just gives a real brief 3 or 4 second transmission and then breaks and then moves? How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to triangulate that? Now, you might be able to tell, once again, if you pick up on scanner, you might be able to tell the general proximity of how close they are to where you're at. But as far as the direction goes, man, good luck, especially if they're moving. And there's simple little procedures and simple little standard operating procedures, if you will, that you can incorporate into your communications plan that can make it intensely frustrating for anyone to DF you, and also to be able to discern what you're even doing with your communications. So that's going to be what I'm going to be talking about on this particular video series. But I'm going to be doing it with a realistic view towards taking kind of a more adult, realistic, I use that word twice, I get that, but a realistic perspective on things, because we can talk ourselves in circles. I mean, if we're trying to set up our comm plan around the thought that the NSA is going to be looking for us, again, don't even use comms and write your last will and testament, because you're done. But if you're being more realistic and you're trying to set up a comm plan so that you can thwart, an opposing force that's similarly equipped and is a non-governmental entity, and you're just simply trying to keep your communications a bit more secure and make yourself a bit more difficult to locate, okay, we can work out from that. Now, if it is somebody like, maybe a government entity that is chasing you down, you also need to look at what's the talent level of the government entity that's chasing you down. For instance, if you're being pursued by the communications shop for your local sheriff's department, well, those guys are mostly amateur radio guys that do radio stuff for a living, and they know a little bit about direction finding, but in terms of being sophisticated signals intelligence people, they're really not. And there's a lot of little things that you can do to frustrate their capabilities to locate you as well. So again, the purpose of this series, I'm going to cover, this is a long intro, but I'm going to be going in and just doing kind of short little pro tips, little things that you can do and keep the topics very short, but we'll cover things like brevity of communications, signal control, using things like directional antennas, all of this kind of stuff, using low power, and just give you little ideas. It's not going to be all that difficult actually to follow along with, and it doesn't involve really all that much specialized equipment. It's just sound operating practices for keeping your communications as secure as possible and making yourself as difficult to find if you're playing adult hide and seek. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it at that point, kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be doing with this, and we'll move on, and I'll start with the first few topics where we'll talk about, again, those little simple procedures that you can incorporate into the way you do radio that makes yourself a little bit better of a radio operator. How about that? So thank you for watching or listening. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee from Visalia, California. Have a wonderful day.